When I reserved my stay at the Lakeview Hotel by Lake Serenity, my expectations were set on a quiet retreat from the non-stop pressures of my marketing job. The hotel, celebrated for its remote tranquility and picturesque lakeside views, promised a much-needed escape. The first impression of the hotel was breathtaking. An aura of old-world elegance with sprawling gardens that kissed the lake's edge. The receptionist's warm welcome was complemented by the key to my room, which she mentioned boasted one of the hotel's finest views of the lake. True to her words, the room was a haven of peace with tasteful decor and a sweeping view through a large bay window. The calm waters of the lake, framed by lush greenery, presented a living painting of calm skies and gentle nature. It was the perfect backdrop to unwind and rejuvenate. However, the peaceful ambience was soon disrupted by a knock at the door. Puzzled, since I hadn't requested any service, I opened the door to find the corridor empty. A folded note on the floor caught my eye, with my name neatly inscribed on the outside. Curiosity piqued, I picked it up and read the unexpected message that shifted the tone of my calm getaway. Meet me at the dock at midnight. There's something about the lake you need to see. The note, unsigned and cryptic, lodged itself in my thoughts, turning over and over as I tried to enjoy the day's tranquility. Who could have left it, and what did they want me to see? As evening painted the sky with strokes of orange and purple, my resolve solidified. I would go to the dock, compelled by a mix of intrigue and a subtle undercurrent of anxiety. Cloaked in a thick jacket against the chill of the lakeside night, I made my way to the appointed place as midnight drew near. The path to the dock was lit only by the moon, casting elongated shadows and making the gentle sounds of the lapping water seem eerily loud in the quiet night. Upon reaching the dock, a silhouette emerged against the moonlight reflected on the water. A man appearing older with weathered features that spoke of many years tending to these grounds. Claire. "Thank you for coming," he said in a deep, resonant voice. "I'm Jonathan, the caretaker here. There's something important you need to know about this place." He proceeded to unfold the history of the Lakeview Hotel, from its illustrious days hosting gala events to its darker times. His narrative took a turn as he recounted a series of mysterious disappearances many decades ago. Guests would wander down to the lake and simply never return, vanishing without a trace. Despite thorough investigations, no concrete explanations were ever uncovered, leaving a shroud of mystery enveloping the hotel. As the anniversaries of those disappearances approach, strange phenomena occur. Jonathan continued, his gaze fixed on the dark waters. Things move on their own. Guests report sightings of figures by the lake at night, and some hear whispers carried by the wind across the lake. The air grew colder as he spoke, and a shiver ran through me. Not from the night air, but from the gravity of his words. "Do you believe these events are connected to the disappearances?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, a grave look in his eyes. "I've seen enough through the years to believe there's something unexplainable at play here. That's why I sent you that note. Tonight is another such anniversary, and I felt it prudent to warn you. Stay vigilant, Claire. The lake, it seems to have a peculiar pull." As we stood there, a sudden chill breeze swept over the dock, carrying a soft, almost sorrowful whisper that seemed to rise from the lake itself. Looking out over the glistening waters, now under the pale glow of the moon, I felt an inexplicable draw towards its hidden depths. Standing there by the lake, the whispering breeze sent ripples across the surface of the water. The feeling of unease settled deeper within me as Jonathan's stories about the lake's past gnawed at my mind. I couldn't help but be drawn in by the mystery, by the chance to uncover a story so deeply tucked away from public knowledge. I thanked Jonathan for his candor and made my way back to the hotel, my thoughts swirling with the eerie tales and the chilling encounter. Back in the safety of my room, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows seeming to dance in the corners. I decided I needed more information. The next morning, after a restless night filled with half-seen dreams and the echoing whispers, I headed to the local library in the nearest town. If there were any truth to the tales, Perhaps there would be records or old newspapers that mentioned the disappearances or anything unusual about the lake. The library was small, the kind where the librarian knows all the local lore and is eager to share it. Mrs. Weber, a kindly older woman with spectacles sliding down her nose, was more than willing to help when I mentioned my interest in the history of the Lakeview Hotel and its mystery. "Oh dear, you're staying there. You must be brave," she chuckled, pulling out stacks of old newspapers and a few dusty books from the back room. As I sifted through the yellowed pages, I found several articles on the disappearances. Each story was eerily similar. Visitors reported feeling drawn to the lake at night, with some never returning. No bodies were ever found, and no traces of foul play were evident. The articles mentioned the local legend of the lake being a mirror to another world, a gate that occasionally opened but never let anyone return. The notion sent a chill through me, even sitting in the sunlit quiet of the library. I gathered copies of the articles and thanked Mrs. Weber, who offered one last piece of advice with a worried frown: "Be careful around that lake. Some things are better left undisturbed." Returning to the hotel, I felt a mix of dread and determination. That evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the lake, I made my way to the dock once more. This time, I carried a camera, hoping to capture any anomalies. The water was calm, almost glassy, and the silence was profound, as if the natural world was holding its breath. As the sky darkened, the air grew inexplicably colder, and the water began to stir. A soft fog rolled over the surface, creeping towards the shore and enveloping me in its cold embrace. I raised my camera, my hands shaking slightly, and took a series of photos of the lake, the dock, and the surrounding area. Just as I was about to review the images, a sudden movement on the water caught my eye. It was subtle, a mere shadow under the moonlight, but it was there. A dark figure, human-like but indistinct, moving across the lake without a sound. I snapped a picture, my heart racing, then turned to leave, feeling an overwhelming urge to flee. But as I turned, I found my path blocked by an old woman, her eyes intense under the brim of a faded hat. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered, her voice urgent. "The shadow in the lake." Nodding hesitantly, I responded, "Yes, I saw something." "Do you know what it is?" Her eyes, reflecting the moonlight, seemed to flicker with a mix of sadness and fear. "That's the guardian of the lake," she said softly, her voice trembling as she spoke. "It appears to those who are drawn to uncover the secrets of this place. You must be cautious, child. Its appearance is not without meaning. It is both a warning and a protector of the depths." The idea of a guardian spirit was something out of local myths, the kind of stories told to keep curious kids away from dangerous waters. But after everything I had witnessed, I was not so quick to dismiss her words. "Why does it show itself to me?" I asked, my curiosity piqued despite the chilling fear that gripped me. "You are touching on truths that have been dormant for ages. This lake," she gestured toward the serene yet ominous body of water, "holds more than just water. It mirrors the history and secrets of this land. Those who seek to uncover these are often tested by the guardian." As the cold fog enveloped us more tightly, the old woman pulled a small, tattered book from her coat pocket. "This was my grandfather's," she explained, handing it to me. "He was a keeper of sorts for this lake. He believed that understanding the guardian could prevent further tragedies. Maybe this will help you." Taking the book, I felt a weighty responsibility settle over me. It was filled with handwritten notes, sketches of the lake and its surroundings, and detailed accounts of encounters with the guardian. The more I read, the more I understood that this was not just a ghost story. It was a part of the lake's living history, intertwined with the lives of those around it. Determined to learn more, I spent the next few days combing through the book and revisiting the archives at the local library. With each piece of history unearthed, the lake seemed to grow more alive, its calm surface deceptive of the activity beneath. Each night, I returned to the dock, hoping to observe more, to understand better. The guardian did not appear again, but the feeling of being watched remained. One evening, As I sat by the lake, the air still and the night quiet, the surface of the water began to ripple without a cause. The ripples formed a pattern, one that matched a diagram in the old woman's book. A summoning symbol. It was then I realized that the guardian was not just protecting the lake's secrets, it was guarding a gateway. The knowledge was overwhelming, and the implications were terrifying. If the lake truly was a gateway, what lay on the other side? And what would happen if that gate were opened? I knew then that my stay at the Lakeview Hotel was no longer just a simple getaway. I was involved in something much larger than myself, something that tied me to the lake and its mysterious guardian. As the days slipped by, I found myself drawn deeper into the lore of the lake and its guardian. My nightly vigils by the water became a routine, each observation adding another layer to my understanding, yet raising more questions than answers. The tranquility of the lake's surface belied the complexity beneath, just as the serenity of the hotel masked the intense undercurrent of my investigation. On what was to be my final night at Lakeview, I ventured down to the dock with a resolve to confront whatever lay behind the guardian's appearances. I carried the old woman's book, now filled with my notes and observations alongside her grandfather's. As I reached the dock, the air was unusually still, the lake mirroring the starry sky so perfectly that it was difficult to tell where the water ended and the heavens began. From the luminous depths, a figure emerged. Not the shadowy form of the guardian I had glimpsed before, but a distinctly human shape. As it approached the shore, the figure became clearer. A woman, her features eerily similar to the old woman who had given me the book. She stepped onto the dock with a grace that seemed to defy the simple act of walking. "I knew you would call," she said. "You've learned much, yet you seek more." Confused and startled, I replied, "I don't understand." "Are you the guardian? How are you here?" She smiled, a knowing, mysterious smile. "The guardian is not one, but many. We are the protectors of this place, chosen from those who once sought its secrets, just as you have. Our task is to ensure that the knowledge does not fall into the wrong hands, for within the lake lies a portal to realms forgotten by time, realms that must not be disturbed without need." My mind reeled at her implication. "Are you saying that I?" "Yes," she interrupted gently. "You have been chosen to join us. Your curiosity, your determination, and your respect for the power of this place have proven your worthiness." "But what about my life, my job, everything outside of this?" I protested, my voice tinged with desperation and awe. "Yours will continue, but you will also serve as a guardian, a keeper of secrets and a protector of the gateway. You will live with one foot in each world, just as I have." She gestured to the calm waters. "The lake chose you, Claire, just as it chose me long ago." As she spoke, the first light of dawn touched the lake, turning the water into a canvas of golden hues. I looked at the shimmering surface, now a boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary, and realized that my world had expanded infinitely. With a sense of awe and responsibility, I accepted my new role, ready to protect the mysteries just beneath the surface, guarding them for the future and learning from them as I straddled the two realms. My fate sealed. I had always dreamed of a quiet retreat, a place where my thoughts could unfurl without the relentless noise of city life. That's why the secluded cabin in the woods seemed perfect, a serene sanctuary where I could finally start my novel. The advertisement promised isolation and tranquility, exactly what I needed to overcome the writer's block that had plagued me for months. Arriving at the cabin on a chilly autumn afternoon, I was struck by the rustic beauty of the place. Nestled among towering pines, it offered an idyllic setting that seemed ripped from the pages of a novel. As I unpacked my belongings and set up my old typewriter, I felt a surge of inspiration. It was here, I was convinced, that I would write my masterpiece. The first night passed peacefully, and I awoke feeling refreshed and eager to write. As I explored the cabin more thoroughly in the morning light, I discovered a drawer in the writing desk that was stuck. Curious and looking for a distraction from the daunting blank page, I wrestled it open, revealing a stack of papers. They were pages from a manuscript yellowed with age and curling at the edges. Intrigued, I began to read, quickly becoming engrossed in the story. It was a novel about a series of murders in a small, isolated town. The narrative was compelling, chilling even, with a level of detail that was unsettling. As I read on, I realized why the manuscript unnerved me so deeply. It described murder scenes that perfectly mirrored a series of unsolved murders that had occurred in this very area over the past year. The realization sent a shiver through me, not of cold, but of fear. The manuscript was dated several years before the murders had actually happened. How could a forgotten story in a dusty drawer eerily predict real-life events? My mind raced with possibilities. Coincidence, a practical joke, or something more sinister? Determined to uncover the truth, I spent the next few hours researching the previous occupants of the cabin. The trail led to an author, Mr. Arthur Green, who had rented the cabin years ago but had vanished without a trace, leaving behind his unfinished manuscript. His disappearance had remained a mystery, much like the plot of his novel. The deeper I dug into Arthur's life and the subsequent murders, the more the boundaries between fiction and reality blurred. The characters in the manuscript began to bear a startling resemblance to real people from the town, some of whom were murder victims. Each chapter in the manuscript ended with a cliffhanger, mirroring the unresolved nature of the actual murder cases. Feeling a growing sense of paranoia, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The rustling of the trees seemed like whispers, and every creak of the cabin felt like a footstep. Was I losing my mind, or was I living in a story dictated by the unfinished manuscript? With each passing hour, the story's grip tightened, its dark narrative intertwining with the reality of the unsolved murders. As sunset approached on my second day at the cabin, I stumbled upon a chilling chapter that hadn't been there the first time I read through the manuscript. It detailed a murder that was eerily similar to what could be my own. The victim was an unsuspecting writer, lured to the cabin under the guise of solitude. Panic set in as I realized that the story was predicting my death, scheduled to occur before I could finish my novel. I was now a character in a deadly narrative, with less than 48 hours to alter my fate. The manuscript was not just predicting murders, it was orchestrating them. I needed to finish the story, to write the ending before it was written for me. Determined to survive and solve the mystery of the manuscript and the murders, I set out to confront the story head-on, rewriting my role in what appeared to be a predetermined plot. Armed with determination and a growing sense of dread, I decided to change the ending of the manuscript to ensure my survival. My fingers flew over the typewriter keys as I crafted new scenes, introduced new evidence that pointed to the identity of the murderer, and most crucially, wrote myself out of the victim's role. But as I wrote, strange occurrences began to disrupt my focus. Objects around the cabin moved seemingly on their own, and chilling gusts of wind blew through closed windows, scattering my pages. It felt as though the cabin itself was resisting my efforts to change the narrative set forth by Arthur Green's original text. I pressed on, driven by the fear of meeting the same fate as the characters in the manuscript. After a sleepless night of rewriting, I had crafted what I hoped was a new conclusion. One where the killer was caught and brought to justice before he could claim his final victim: me. With the new manuscript complete, I took a moment to breathe, thinking I might have just saved my own life. However, as I relaxed, the old typewriter began to type on its own, the keys clacking rapidly. Horrified, I watched as it undid my changes, reverting back to the original story written by Arthur. Realizing that merely changing the manuscript was not enough, I knew I needed to understand why these murders were happening and how they were linked to Arthur's disappearance and the manuscript. My investigation led me to the local library, where I delved into newspaper archives for anything related to the murders or Arthur's life. After hours of digging, I uncovered an old article that mentioned a feud between Arthur Green and another local author, Mr. Charles Devon. The article hinted at a bitter rivalry over their writings and accusations of plagiarism. Charles had vanished shortly after Arthur, which had never been solved. Connecting the dots, I wondered if Charles might have taken over Arthur's manuscript to orchestrate the murders as a twisted form of revenge, using the narrative to control the events. Maybe Charles was still out there, pulling the strings to ensure the manuscript's predictions came true. Armed with this new theory, I visited the address listed for Charles in the old town records. The house was decrepit, nearly swallowed by the overgrowth of vegetation, but as I approached, I felt certain that answers lay within. Inside, I found a shrine of sorts to Arthur Green, complete with newspaper clippings, photos, and multiple copies of the manuscript. Before I could investigate further, I heard the creak of a floorboard above me. Heart pounding, I called out, announcing my presence and my knowledge of the murders. "Charles, I know what you've done. It's over," I shouted into the stillness. The figure that emerged from the shadows was not an old revenge-driven writer as I expected, but a haggard, almost ghostly woman, Mrs. Devon, Charles's widow. She confessed that after her husband had disappeared, she discovered his plan to ruin Arthur and had decided to continue his work, using the manuscript to control the narrative of the town and its tragedies. Distraught but resolute, I convinced Mrs. Devon to turn herself in, explaining that no story was worth the pain and horror she had inflicted. We called 911 together, and she was taken into custody, the manuscript's deadly predictions finally put to an end. With the mystery resolved, I returned to the cabin, the weight of the past few days heavy on my shoulders. I packed up my belongings, the manuscript tucked safely away, never to be used again. The story had finally ended, but the impact of those terrifying days would linger. And as the cabin disappeared from my rearview mirror, I made a silent vow to keep writing, no matter the cost, because I now understood the true power of words. They could shape worlds, change fates, and reveal the deepest truths, even those hidden in the secluded woods. I had only been at Hollowbrook Middle School for a few weeks, but the legend of Room 13 had already woven itself into my 7th grade imagination. Rumors swirled among the students about the cursed classroom, where it was said that those who entered never truly left the same. My curiosity, often my guiding and damning light, lured me to uncover the truth behind these chilling tales. One crisp fall afternoon, as shadows lengthened and the corridors emptied, I found myself standing before the infamous Room 13. My heart pounded as I reached for the cold metal handle, ignoring the whispers of warning from my more cautious classmates. The door creaked ominously behind me as I stepped inside, sealing my fate within its eerie confines. The room was shrouded in an unnatural darkness that seemed to swallow the weak afternoon light. As the door clicked shut, a suffocating silence enveloped me. My breaths echoed off the walls, the only sound in a sea of stillness. Panic began to claw at my chest. I desperately fumbled along the wall for a light switch, but found nothing. My hands shook, and my flashlight slipped from my fingers, its light extinguishing upon impact with the ground. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Hunger gnawed at my stomach and thirst parched my throat, but it wasn't just physical discomfort that twisted my insides with fear. Whispers slithered through the darkness, taunting me with hints of betrayal and deceit. Shadows seemed to dance just at the edge of my vision, their malevolent presence suffocating. As I stood frozen in fear, I realized that the stories were more than just schoolyard tales. The air grew colder, and I could feel the subtle shift of energy as though something unseen was moving around me. My mind raced, every story I had heard about Room 13 replaying in vivid detail. They spoke of a student decades ago who entered the room and was never seen again. Teachers whispered about mysterious writings that appeared on the blackboard, only to be erased and never spoken of. Determined to not succumb to the growing terror, I tried to trace my steps back to the door, but the room seemed to have rearranged itself, the familiar layout now a confusing labyrinth. Every turn I took led me back to the center of the room, where the temperature dropped even further, and the air felt charged with a silent warning. The whispers grew into murmurs, then shouts. Accusations of treachery and warnings of doom converged in a cacophonous symphony that overwhelmed my senses. In a desperate attempt to escape the noise, I covered my ears, only to touch something wet and sticky. Pulling my hands back, I strained to see in the poor light, but could not identify the substance. Just as I felt my resolve waver, threatened by the encroaching madness, a dim light flickered in the corner of the room. It was coming from underneath what appeared to be an old wooden desk. Crawling towards it, driven by both fear and hope, I found an ancient oil lamp emitting a weak but steady flame. Next to the lamp lay a journal, its pages yellowed with age. Opening the dusty book, I discovered it was a diary belonging to the student who had disappeared. The entries detailed their own experiences in room 13, describing the same eerie phenomena I was encountering. The final entry was unfinished, the sentence cut off abruptly, the pen still lying beside the open page, as if hastily abandoned. The realization hit me hard. I was reliving the same nightmare, caught in a loop that had claimed who knew how many before me. The journal was a warning, a guide perhaps, left by the previous victim to help the next. With trembling hands, I read about a hidden exit, a way out known only to those who had braved the depths of the room's secrets. Gathering every shred of courage I had left, I followed the instructions laid out in the journal. They led me to a loose floorboard under the same desk where I had found the diary. With effort, I pried it open, revealing a narrow tunnel that sloped downwards into darkness. Crawling through the tunnel, I emerged outside behind the school, gasping for air and bathed in the light of a full moon. The door to room 13 remained closed, its secrets lurking just beyond reach, waiting for the next curious soul. As I write this now, safe in my room, the memories of that day are as vivid and terrifying as ever. The legend of room 13 is real, and I am proof that it claims more than just the sanity of those who dare uncover its truths. Hollowbrook Middle School will continue to educate its students, but beneath its hallowed halls lies a darkness that is both a warning and a whisper, calling to those drawn to the unknown. And as for me, I am forever changed, a survivor of room 13, with a story that few would believe and even fewer would dare to investigate.